What's worse than breakup?
Matching with a boy on Tinder.
What's worse than breakup?
Being broke financially.
What's worse than breakup?
Using Android.
What's worse than breakup?
Matching with your girlfriend on Tinder.
What's worse than breakup?
Having double chin.
What's worse than breakup?
When your mom posts you on Facebook with your underwear.
What's worse than breakup?
Matching with a girlfriend on Tinder.
What's worse than breakup?
Goon dies mid-phone.
What's worse than breakup?
Running out of hookah.
What's worse than breakup?
Being ginger.
What's worse than breakup?
Shitting while your asshole is injured.
What's worse than breakup?
Having a girl and then realizing it's a boy.
What's worse than breakup?
Being scammed by a scammer when you're a scammer.
What's worse than breakup?
When your girl using you for money.
What's worse than breakup?
When you get booty sweat.
What's worse than breakup?
Stealing from a store and getting caught.
What's worse than breakup?
Running out to expensive clothing brands.
What's worse than breakup?
When the teacher bends over in front of you.
What's worse than breakup?
Smelling your teacher's breath.
What's worse than breakup?
When your barber ruins your haircut.
What's worse than breakup?
When your friend dishes in a party.
What's worse than breakup?
When the bad teacher is sick, but the substitute is even worse.
What's worse than breakup?
Running out of shots in a club.
What's worse than breakup?
When your girl using you for money.
What's worse than breakup?
When GTA 6 gets delayed to 2027.
What's worse than breakup?
When Apple iCloud takes your last $5.
What's worse than breakup?
Dating a girl that is taller than you.
What's worse than breakup?
Get married.
What's worse than breakup?
When your friends owes you money but don't pay you back.
What's worse than breakup?
Sunday night feeling.
What's worse than breakup?
Running out of McDonald's points.
What's worse than breakup?
Phone dies mid-shitting.
What's worse than breakup?
When kids say 6-7.
What's worse than breakup?
Running out of friends.
What's worse than breakup?
Running out of Tinder swipes.